Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now let's turn to the issue of remittances. You may know that this week the World Bank released a report about remittances. The figures are global in scope, and although it seems like there was barely a drop in the amount overall, the statistics show that there was a decline of 12.5% in sub-Saharan Africa during 2020. Nevertheless, there were increased amounts being sent to countries like Mozambique, Ghana, Zambia, and Kenya. But according to those same figures, it turns out that Nigeria is the main cause of the dip in numbers. So given that remittances are a key part of income in African countries, it's worth taking a closer look at this World Bank report. And who better to help us do this than Dr. Ken Ife, who is a consultant with the World Bank, as well as lead consultant to the regional body ECOWAS and the African Development Bank. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So overall, global remittances are down marginally at about 1.6%, but the picture in sub-Saharan Africa is less rosy, 12.5% decline according to the World Bank. That's not terrible because it's better than what was predicted, but it is still pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. You know, in the period 2012 to 2018, Nigeria was posting between 24 and 26 billion dollars in remittances. In 2019, we're actually 50% of the whole remittance coming to sub-Saharan Africa. It was in 2020 that we had this crash of 27%. I hope I would describe it as crash because I have a feeling that the money has gone elsewhere, using other channels, because we don't know how much of it is in cryptocurrency. We don't know.
And I think the World Bank made that point, actually, that it is...
because Nigeria is ranking #1 in Africa in cryptocurrency. We don't know. There may be a lot more things. But the important thing is that with a drop of that magnitude, of course, they probably won't have time to go to the details of where they come from and how the transmission channels. But if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, the drop is only about 12.5%. And if you look at the low income to middle income countries, is marginal.
Absolutely.
It's just about 1 point something percent, as you saw. So about $548 billion, and they only lost 8 billion, in 2020. So it's not much. But the prediction is that the growth will be 2.6% in subsequent years for the sub-Saharan African countries. Now, one thing that is significant from my perspective is that in 2008, you had an inflection. If you look at overseas development assistance and foreign direct investment, there was an inflection in 2008. And that was the first time that the foreign direct investment exceeded remittances. But now, today, you see, if you take the low income and medium income countries, the $540 billion, which is their remittance, is greater than the ODA is 179 billion.
Yep.
Add the 259 billion FDI, is exceeded both of them. But if you look at Nigeria, it's even more remarkable because the Nigerian remittance, which has dropped to 17.6 billion, is still much higher than not only the ODA, which is about $4 billion, add the FDI, which is about just around $2 billion. In fact, add all the capital importation. All the capital importation for 2020 was $9.6 billion, less than half of what came in the previous year. But did we see this happening, coming? The answer is, of course, yes. In the second quarter of last year, first of all, in the first quarter, the remittance was around $5.8 billion. Then COVID came, and many other things may have happened apart from COVID. In the second quarter, it dropped to $1.5 billion. In the third quarter, 1.4. And then in the fourth quarter, 1.5. That is capital importation. But the remittances themselves dropped in the second quarter from just below $6 billion to $3.3 billion. And that was when the alarm bell went and CBN moved in. CBN wanted the International Money Transfer Organizations to start remitting the dollar into domiciliary accounts.
Yes, that's
then they didn't quite comply.
Yeah.
It took it up. It took it further. Then asked the commercial banks to close the Naira account of those IMTOs to force them to do what they have to do. And they still didn't. They now went a bit further to incentivize by giving 4 Naira to a dollar if you use the proper channels. And then in fact, some banks actually increased their own to 5 Naira.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I'd like to get to that in a minute and get to talk about Nigeria some more, because you're making some really interesting points there. But just looking at Africa generally, if things are better than was predicted by the World Bank, because they had predicted 20% and we saw 12.5%, what happened to improve things? In other words, to lessen the impact that the World Bank had predicted last year? Was it, for instance, the stimulus packages in America, the helicopter money coming in from Europe, etc., or was it down to the individual stories of the people sending money?
I think it's a mixture of both, because America have a much more quantitative response.
And a lot of people sending money are sending it from America,
of course.
They?
Yes, it's the majority. After that, to come to Europe and then Germany. But it's more from America. And the palliatives were such that, you earn a lot of money from not working. So,
absolutely.
So
in fact, in Europe, they were paying people's salaries anyway. So there would not have been a dramatic change in their lifestyle.
Even though there was huge unemployment, a huge number of people went into the unemployment register in America, they still received money.
Yeah, but also the reasons for going into that's the point I was going to make. Absolutely. Some people chose unemployment because it was more lucrative, than actually doing a job. But it's interesting that in some countries like Kenya, Ghana, Mozambique, Zambia, there's actually been growth. Looking at those economies on the macro level, there's less overseas direct investment and less, as you said, foreign aid going to those countries. So it's remittances that have been incredibly resilient in those countries.
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is, for some of them, there is a migration from informal transfer to formal transfer. And there are reasons. In fact, the report even suggested that in the case of Nigeria, we had the same, but I think that wasn't the case, because we've always had a lot, leverage. If it is the case, then you wouldn't even have had a drop. So if it didn't work for Nigeria, but it could be an explanatory factor in the other countries that there are more coming in. But of course, the palliatives in the countries also worked, and people were very, very afraid that their families may suffer. So they even have to go the extra mile of borrowing money if they were not in the constituencies of America and UK, to make sure that they're able to rescue family members. So there was more response from that perspective.
Right. So let's look at the decline and look at Nigeria specifically, because you touched on it and you made some very interesting points there, because that's a different picture, as you said, to the rest of the continent. The World Bank has reported a very large decline in Nigeria of 28%. Just tell us what's behind that different picture again. I know you've touched on it, but just kind of remind us of what it is.
There is one. Nigeria is we have the highest cost of remittance, because it costs about 8% for $200. And even the SDG, everybody wants to bring this down. And I remember 15 years ago, I was doing a project in the UK with partnership with Denmark to see if we can bring these charges. And that's very substantial. And when you keep inflicting very high charges, the tendency is for people to look for alternative ways of remitting.
Absolutely.
And there are more money coming in, but less through the official channel. They are coming in on a one-to-one basis. You just go to you just give your money to, just send it to an informal channel, and then they credit you with the naira. And the gap between the official rate at 400, run around 400, and the black market rate of about 475 is huge.
Absolutely.
It's about 18 naira. So that arbitrage opportunity is being exploited by quite a lot of people. And then they can't, even the 4 or 5 naira per dollar incentive may still not bring all of them back, because they are earning. Is a question of comparing 5 naira to 18 naira.
Absolutely.
that's a lot of. And then the CBN has tried to get the, and then they actually appointed new remittance organizations now. A lot more have now been appointed, and that brings more competition. So it's no longer, it's not just Western Union, and we now have about 8 more. So competition can drive the cost down. But government policy needs to come in as well. But the CBN is trying. But you've got to, they're juggling, they have too many balls in the air.
Well, let's just drill down on that further, because analysts have suggested that because Nigeria has a more controlled currency, and so there is a parallel market, and a lot of the money flowing into Nigeria is flowing informally. There have also been policy changes by the central bank, which you mentioned briefly there, which have effectively dollarized remittances. So rather than sending naira, recipients are receiving dollars, because, and the problem there is that most people don't actually have dollar accounts. And often, I mean, never mind Lagos and Abuja, where you've got loads and loads of banks and so on. I mean, if you go to rural areas, less sort of, smaller towns and so on, people queue to get some of these dollars, because, I mean, most of the banks don't actually have the dollars.
That's true. But the dollar was remitted in the first instance. What was sent from America is dollar.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a physical dollar. Okay. The people have to have the dollar in reserve in order to be able to give it to you, because the person needs the money immediately. They go to the bank, I need to pay my school fees, I need to help my this, that, or the other thing, pay electricity, they've cut it off, and you send it, and they want to take it immediately.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
so you can hear some stories in the commercial banks.
Absolutely.
About queuing up to receive your dollar.
Absolutely.
Now that bit is real. Is real because of the forex situation that we have, and about 55% of our import is for the industrial raw materials. About 30% of the forex is being consumed in importing fuel products, which we could produce locally. So you have all that pressure, and then the banks also have to deal with regulation about the capital account controls, and also you have macro-prudential measures all in place. So they have all sorts of reasons to delay paying you that day and told you you're in a queue, come back in a week or something like that. So all of those that could conspire to deny that. So what then happens? If you send the first one and they are still waiting, the next one you send it through informal channel.
Absolutely.
So that you now begin to see the diversion, the cost for the.
That's very interesting. Please stay with us. We want to talk with you a little bit more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our assessment of a new World Bank report, which suggests that the last year has seen a decline of remittances to sub-Saharan Africa. Stay with us. Come back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, as you may know, millions of people around the world depend on relatives working overseas to send money home. They depend on these global remittances to make ends meet. But the coronavirus pandemic threatened to upend that, potentially plunging millions into poverty, because these remittances have been a lifeline which goes directly into the pockets of families in need. And this is crucial because the large majority of foreign aid does nothing of the kind. Well, those families will be glad to know that according to the latest World Bank estimates, those remittances fell by a lot less than predicted. Last year, the estimate for a fall was 20% in sub-Saharan Africa, but the actual figure turned out to be 12.5%, except in Nigeria, where the drop is estimated to have been higher than predicted at 28%. And Dr. Ken Ife, consultant with the World Bank, as well as lead consultant to the regional body ECOWAS and the African Development Bank, is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. And just remind us of how crucial, I think you mentioned it previously, but just remind us of how crucial these remittances are and how dependent families are back home on that income, not just for food consumption, but for school fees, paying utilities, etc.
And health, of course. Imagine if you hear that family member in Nigeria is taken in for COVID. You know it's a matter of days if no intervention comes in. And then you send money through the banking system, and for some reason they're saying they haven't received it. They are still waiting. You will send another one almost immediately,
Absolutely.
but you are going to use alternative channels. So that's where diversion begins. And how far does it go? But it tends to hover around dollar. But how about those sending pounds?
Yeah, absolutely.
How about those doing Dutch mark and Chinese yuan?
And euros,
Yeah,
of course.
so and euro, of course, yes. So they are not so much affected by the restrictions going on. So that's one. Then of course you have second thing
But
contend
sorry to
with
interrupt
the
you.
differential.
Don't those restrictions mean that that money has to be converted to dollars before the person received it?
That's
the central
right.
bank dollarized it.
Correct. So that's one. But
It's
also
another potential
remember that
complication.
you have commissions when in each stage of the transaction.
Yeah.
But it's not very significant. Then you have the second one, of course, in the mind of the sender, the differentials. Although there's an incentive of 4 to 5 naira per dollar, but is going to have to match this against the speed of delivery, and then as well as the quantum of the difference between the official rates and the black market rates. And so when speed is of the essence, then they may have to utilize that, But I guess the CBN was right in trying to get an insight into what exactly is going on. It's like when we closed the border. It wasn't just to close the border, but there was a reason. There are many reasons. And one of them is to actually not see the size of the smuggling economy.
Yes.
And we suddenly found out
To see what
that
sort of
we are
impact,
earning 5
yes.
billion to 10 billion naira every day, more than what was being reported. So it just gives you an idea of the size of that smuggling economy, apart from all the other things that they had to look at. So that became. But the thing is that how do we hope to bounce back? And we don't know how much of the cryptocurrency and virtual currency, what role that they are playing in this. Because given that Nigerians seem to be ahead of most people in Africa in embracing the cryptocurrency.
Although, of course, cryptocurrency has also suffered a setback by some of the policies that have been put in place.
Inevitably.
I mean, it's suffered. So that's another discussion. But to underscore the significance of these global remittances, you made a very interesting point earlier, which I would like us to discuss further. You mentioned that those remittances are expected to overtake foreign direct investment as the biggest inflow of foreign capital to developing countries.
Correct.
That is a big deal.
In the case of Nigeria, it's actually 4 things that it is higher than. The 17.2 billion, which is a reduced quantity from 26 billion, is higher than 4 major things. Is higher than a combination of the overseas development assistance, which is about 4 billion, plus the foreign portfolio investment, plus the the foreign direct investment, plus other investments. Because the total investment 2020, the total capital importation was $9.6 billion, which was less than half of what it was the previous year. So you're looking at 4 quantities that the remittance is bigger than combined. Whereas if you look at the low-income countries and the middle-income countries, it's only it's nearly equal, but it's just the 540 billion is just bigger than 179 billion overseas development assistance plus 259 billion of the FDI. You didn't add the others. You didn't add the foreign portfolio investment. You didn't add the other investment. So Nigeria is very particular. It's very important. And then let me also say that when I looked at the figure that World Bank talked about, the migration report, it says just over 1.5, about 1.5 Nigerian in the diaspora. That's not true. Because, I'm a number, but I have 7 children in London.
Yeah.
So what does that say about the actual number out there? You have to get that from census figures.
Yes.
Not from migration figures.
Yes, that's a good point. So shrinking FDI then into places like Nigeria, why is that?
There's so many reasons for
I mean,
the most classical reason, policy? The classical reason is infrastructure. Because you're asking people to come and invest in your economy. And they have to look at the infrastructure. Yeah. Are they borrowing money abroad to come and build infrastructure before actually getting to the core business? That's the biggest one. Then the second one, of course, is you talk about government policy. The government policy, Finance Act 2019, dealt with another problem, which is the double taxation. So now a foreign company, group company can come to Nigeria without worrying to pay tax. And you know that is the driver of the illicit transfers. Africa loses $84 billion every year on illicit transfer. Nigeria, $8.4 billion every year. And what does that mean? A group head office is domiciled in Dubai, where they don't pay tax or something. And then they now invoice. They now under invoice and over invoice, depending on where it's going. So their company in Nigeria invoices the Dubai head office, and then they import through. So in that way, they double and triple. You have that big markup in the price. But now our laws are catching up. Actually, to be honest with you, the Finance Acts 2019 and 2020 are actually progressively closing a lot of these loopholes and creating much more favorable environment for. But
as you said, as they're doing that, there's the other issue.
There's another one about tax. Tax. On paper, you will see, Nigeria is the lowest tax in Africa. But then when you look at the real tax burden that these companies have to generate their own electricity, private electricity generation is 3 times more than the public utility.
It's a form of tax.
Yeah, it's a form of tax. And then they have to dig their borehole, they have to maintain the thing, everything. And transportation costs are rising. Input costs is about 20% of input cost. Transportation power is about 30% of the input costs. They can't even compete.
And even housing. Sometimes they've got to build houses and all that.
And then security costs.
Yes.
The cost of security is just pushing some people to the cliff. But having said that, though, despite all of that, Nigeria is a resource-rich country. So some business people still defy those laws of gravity and want to come here.
Okay.
And that explains why of the 90 million MSMEs in Africa, 45 million of them are from Nigeria.
Okay.
So why is that? If our population ratio is 18% of Africa, GDP 18%, but entrepreneurship we are 50%.
Okay. Well,
it tells you that despite all those infrastructure problems and all that, people still entrepreneurial.
Let us end on that bucolic note, because it sounds much more optimistic than talking about the bad things. Dr. Ken Ife, consultant with the World Bank and lead consultant to the regional body ECOWAS, as well as the African Development Bank. It's always an intellectual experience talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.